Brussels, we all shared memories of these terrorist attacks. Do you remember what you felt when you first heard the news? Or later, when you saw someone of Arab descent, a hijabi woman next to you in the subway, or an Arab man standing in your queue in the airport? I remember what I felt. I was angry and afraid. I saw Islam as a violent religion, and I blamed it all on angry Arabs. That all changed when I went to visit the Umayyad Mosque in Damascus. It is a very old and very beautiful mosque, but it is what I saw inside the mosque that made me feel falling off my horse. In the courtyard, children were playing and families were picnicking. Inside the mosque, some people were listening to a preacher, where others were just taking a nap. It was so quiet, so peaceful. There was no violence there. Actually, there was no violence anywhere, wherever I went. So I started to wonder, how could I have been so wrong? How could I have been so prejudiced about an entire culture? This event changed my life. The next year, I went to visit Jordan, and in 2011, I went to live in Cairo for 5 years. I wanted to live in the Arab world and understand Islamic civilization. And as I'm a historian and a philosopher, I took a deep dive into history and philosophy. Me, as well as most Europeans, think that we have invented everything, from mathematics to ice cream. But what I learned in Cairo was actually making these beliefs crack. What I learned was that our real history looks very differently. Let me give you an example. The Renaissance. We all know that the Renaissance is the foundation of modern Europe. It is the time when Roman and Greek knowledge was put back under light after having been forgotten in the dark Middle Ages. It was in Italy in the 14th and 15th centuries that Renaissance ideas like the solar system, mathematics, or philosophy were indeed invented and spread all over Europe. And of course, these ideas are quintessentially European. But are they really so? Take mathematics. Important inventions like the telephone, the heart rate monitor, or the diesel engine would never have been possible without algebra. Well, lucky for us, algebra was invented by Al-Khwarizmi, a Persian scientist in the 9th century, using Indian numbers. These numbers were then Arabized and became our numbers. Algebra became the basis of all our mathematics. And without algebra, no artificial intelligence or cell phones. Or let's take medicine. The hospital was invented in Baghdad in the 9th century. And Avicenna, another Persian thinker of the 10th century, wrote books about medicine that would have been used in Europe for medical education until 1650. In philosophy, the battle between science and religion, a battle that is still ongoing in Europe today, was actually started by Al-Farabi, again a Muslim philosopher living in the 9th and 10th century. He said that religious truth is for the masses, while scientific truth is for the philosophers. All of this was happening during the Islamic Golden Age. And back then, the largest city of the world was not Rome or Athens or even Constantinople. It was Baghdad. Baghdad was founded in 762 by Al-Mansur, the second caliph of the Abbasid Empire. Al-Mansur was fascinated by geometry, so he wanted to use this geometry to build the perfect city. And indeed, Baghdad was perfectly round. At its peak, there were living no less than 1 million people in Baghdad, so hygiene was very important. There were 1,000 hammams, and the streets were weekly flushed and thus cleaned by the water of the Tigris River. A later caliph, Al-Ma'mun, wanted to collect all the knowledge of the world. So he built the House of Wisdom, just outside the city. And in this House of Wisdom, all the works of philosophy, science, and medicine were translated from Greek, Syriac, Persian, and Sanskrit, gathering the largest library of the world. So this is how Greek ideas took their voyage via Baghdad, where they fused with ideas from the Middle East and India, and in the end sowing the seeds of the Renaissance. We tend to think, indeed, that we invented everything. But this Islamic Golden Age ended in 1258. Why? Because it was destroyed by the Mongols. The Mongols destroyed Baghdad and destroyed the House of Wisdom in 1258. They say that the Tigris River turned black because of all the ink of the thousands of books that have been thrown in the river. But in the meantime, Muslims had made their way to Europe, in Spain and Sicily, where they built another vibrant culture. And it was there that a child of one of these cultures, the Muslim philosopher Averroes, was born in the 12th century in Andalusia. Averroes was known as the commentator or explainer of Aristotle. If you have ever tried to read Aristotle, you know that it's not an easy read. So people were happy to use Averroes to understand what Aristotle had to say. When Averroes was translated into Latin, his ideas as well were introduced in Europe. And that happened at the University of Paris in the 13th century. What were these ideas? Well, scientific thinking and logic, also the idea that religious truth is for the masses and scientific truth is for the philosophers. I'll give you an example. The immortality of the soul. According to religion, the soul is immortal and goes to heaven after death. But according to science, Averroes says, the soul is mortal and dies with the body. Another example is the creation of the world. According to religion, the world is created by God in 7 days. But according to science, Averroes says, the world is eternal and has never been created. Not bad for a Muslim thinker in the 12th century, huh? There's no surprise to you that the church, of course, didn't like these ideas, or the followers of these ideas, the so-called Averroists. They were condemned by the church in Paris at the end of the 13th and beginning of the 14th century. That's the reason why they fled Paris and they went to Italy, where they still could discuss these ideas. It is this openness in Italy that gave a boost to scientific discoveries and to new theories like the heliocentric model of Copernic and Galileo Galilei. Does it start to sound familiar? So the Renaissance didn't start by sudden discoveries of Greek and Roman texts. No, these ideas took a grand voyage through time. The ancient Greeks received ideas from the Egyptians and the Babylonians. These Greek ideas and the following centuries went to Alexandria and Haran in modern-day Turkey. From there, in the 8th and 9th century, they went to Baghdad, where they fused with Indian ideas. And from Baghdad, they went to Egypt, and then to Spain. From Spain, they went to Paris. And from Paris, they went to Italy, what we call the Renaissance in the 14th and 15th century. From Italy, they actually went to the Netherlands, where the first ideas of the Enlightenment were born. Now, why is this important? We Europeans think that we have invented everything. And by doing so, we see other cultures as inferior. We also like what I would like to call West-splaining. We like to explain Islam to the Muslims and China to the Chinese. We love lecturing other people and looking down on others. We like to talk about how other cultures and what they have copied from us, but we forget what we have copied from them. All cultures deserve a place in our history books. And that is important, because we might not know about these Arabic contributions, but in the Renaissance itself, it was not forgotten yet. On the contrary, it was even honored. See, for example, the School of Athens, painted by Raphael in 1513. Does it remind you of a similar place in Baghdad, by any chance? Now, in the School of Athens, we of course see all Greek philosophers, with Plato and Aristotle in the middle. But there is much more to it. See, for example, indeed, the Islamic philosopher Averroes on the painting. You can see him now in detail. If we want, by giving other cultures their rightful place in our history books, we will also start to see people from other cultures differently. Instead of us looking at them as threatening, we will start to see them as interesting. Instead of us being anxious, we will start to be curious. The contributions were written out of history conveniently because it threatened the authority of the church. But is it possible that it is convenient for some people still today? It is up to us to right this wrong. So the question is, how can we do that? Well, if we want to change the way we live together in this world, we have to start by rewriting our history. At universities, all contributions from other cultures should be included in our courses about the history of science, philosophy, the arts, or geometry. And universities are teaching the teachers of tomorrow, who in their turn will change what children learn at school. By rewriting our history, we will rewrite our view of the world, our attitudes, our actions. It will take some time. It's not easy, but it's urgent. So let's start with the rewriting today. Thank you very much.